Hey guys, welcome back to Builder Funnel Radio. I am excited because today is the first episode of a new show that we're going to have here called Building a Family Business. And I'm excited about this one because we have several generations and decades of experience in family dynamics, transitioning the business, moving through, different elements throughout the construction space. And also, I'll have basically my dad and my uncle here with me, and so we'll just kind of get to go off script a little bit and talk about some fun stuff. But I think that this show is going to be really valuable for you guys. We'll be able to share a lot of things that our family has gone through, and my goal is going to be to kind of extract the knowledge here from Wes and Brooks, who are joining me today. So, Wes, Brooks, welcome to the show. How's it going today?
Going great. Thanks, man.
Doing well. Thanks, Spence.
I figured a good way to kick things off is kind of introduce you guys and let our audience basically know who you are and kind of what your background is and what your history is. And a lot of times here on Builder Funnel Radio, we start with how you got into the construction space. So, Brooks, let's start with you. How did you get involved in all of this?
Well, it was kind of interesting. I got started back when I was 14, and I was old enough to actually scrap lots. And that was one of my first jobs, was scrapping lots. And I have some very distinct memories of picking lumber out of the frozen ground and throwing them in the back of the truck, and progressed from that to learning how to do foundations, do framing, and just worked my way up through a lot of different positions within the construction business, and ended up owning and operating our own construction business up until the last couple of years.
Yeah, and just for some context too, so you started when you were 14, so why were you scrapping lots? Kind of give the context there. Why that versus something else?
Well, I think scrapping lots, because that's something you can do with relatively little skill. It's someone can point and say, go to that pile, pick up that lumber, put it in the truck, and someone will drive it away to the dump. And I think that's how. And I like to earn money, so I was excited to try to get some work, do something. And I'm 55, so you couldn't work until you were 15 or 16 for somebody else. So that was something I could do along with having a paper route. That's why I started scrapping lots. And, I didn't know anything at the time.
Sure. Yeah. And how about you, Wes? How did you get into this mess as well?
Good question. So I'm 5 years older than Brooks. So when he was 14, I was 19. So my introduction to working in construction was a little bit different than Brooks's, but not too much different. I started, our grandfather was a builder, of course, and he liked to dump large piles of beauty bark on lots where he had just completed a house. And that was his idea of landscaping at that time, which would have been in the late 60s, early 70s. So my sisters and I would go out and face probably 20, 30 yards of bark and get out our shovels and start spreading that bark. So we do that on weekends. So that was one of my first introductions. The other one was like Brooks. I did scrap lots. I think I have stronger memories of cleaning out houses or scrapping them out to get them ready for typically for carpet and cabinets and things like that. So we were going through and just pulling out construction debris and vacuuming out the ducts and so on. And so that was my second introduction to construction, I guess. Just, doing the grunt labor work that needed to be done around the construction site and slowly getting exposed to other parts of the business.
Yeah. And you said it was your grandfather. Was he the one then that started the original business that's kind of morphed into what it is today?
Well, not totally, no. So, and Brooks is better on the history than I am, but certainly our grandfather's name was Cecil, and Cecil was introduced to the business by his father-in-law, who was already in the construction space in the Seattle area. And so that's how Cecil got into the business. Cecil then brought his son into the business, Monty, who's our father. And then of course we moved into the business aspect as well. And our sisters were certainly involved in that building process. So one of the neat things that Dad did to introduce us to the business was back in the 70s, we were looking at college. And so there's 5 kids in the family, so a lot of kids, and they all had to go to college. And we were in the midst of what started out as the Boeing downturn in 1970. And so market had been pretty bad, slowly grinding our way out of that. And so the only way to make money for college at that time, Dad decided we should start building houses on our own. So all 5 of the kids built houses. We all built spec houses. I framed my first house when I was 17, and basically we were thrown out on a lot, and here's a building permit, and here's someone to help train you a little bit, kind of a lead foreman, and he would show us what to do every day. Then we would do it, and then he'd come back at the end of the day and say, not so good. We're gonna have to rework that, and then we would fix it and move on. So that's really how we learned the building business specifically, was that day-to-day process over a number of summers, right, Brooks? It was quite a few summers.
I think it was over maybe almost 10 summers, from start to finish, from the very first house that you guys built probably in 76, and we did it up until 85, depending on who was around to do stuff.
Yeah. And so
that first house, I think, sold for, was it 39,000 or something? Just a little
something.
Little rectangle, just a little 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath box.
It was a 960 plan.
Yeah, it was the 960 plan.
160 square feet.
Yeah. Build a few of those.
A few. Yeah.
We did. So we soon graduated to houses that were slightly over 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, we got to the 1210 plan, a famous.
That's right. Yeah, the 1210. That was a killer plan.
And so basically it started with, you said Cecil's father-in-law, and then it was Cecil,
that was
and then Brooks, maybe guide us through a little bit of back to the beginning and guide us through current, just to give some context.
Sure. Yeah, so H.H. Benson was our great-grandfather on our grandmother's side. So Cecil's wife, Dorothy, was a Benson. And he came out with Great Northern Railroad in the early 1900s as a real estate attorney. Had quite a few kids and needed to make some extra money, so he got into developing in North Seattle and built apartments and houses, and that went on from 1909 up until in the 40s, and that's when Cecil, our grandfather, got into the business after World War II, and then that evolved into where we are today.
Gotcha. Okay. And so really kind of fast forwarding, you said you guys kind of got into college and were building the houses, and that was a way to get through college. And then what happened then? Did you guys go just right into the business, or did you take some other paths first, or how did that shake out?
Well, maybe I was first. So I graduated from college and decided that the one thing I did not want to do, based on my experience scrapping lots and cleaning out houses, was to become a builder. So I definitely looked for some other opportunities early on, but within about a year, Dad asked me to do a market study for him for a retirement community that we were thinking of building. And since I had already done some market research work for another firm in the area right out of school, that seemed like a good fit for me. And that's kind of how I got introduced back into the business, by doing that market study. And from there, graduated into building spec houses over the next year or so. And then Brooks came in about 4 years later, 5 years later, and jumped right into the business.
Yeah, and I just jumped right in as Wes hired me as a construction superintendent, building houses, running jobs. When I graduated, I was already married, so I just jumped right in and started working right in the business.
And then 2 years later, we hired on our youngest brother, Todd, and then he came in and started doing the construction supervision work that Brooks was doing, and Brooks started taking over things around marketing and those areas. I was in charge of finding lots and coming up with the permits and working on the financing. And so we kind of split up those duties, and that worked pretty well.
So at this point, you've got, the three of you as brothers in the business, and you're all working with your dad, Monty. And so I'm always interested in how this kind of all shook out. You said, yeah, we kind of just split the stuff up, and was it just that easy, or did you think through like, oh yeah, you're going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing this, that's where our strengths are, or kind of just evolved naturally? How did that work out?
The answer would be yes. And no.
Yes.
So it was not a well thought out plan. I think when Brooks joined me, I was desperate to have somebody take over the construction process, because at that point I was doing that entire process. Our dad was pretty busy with his building a retirement community at that time. And so we really were doing spec houses on our own. It was just the first me, and then it was me and Brooks, and then it was Brooks, me, and Todd. So anyway, I don't know if you've ever read the book E-Myth, but it's that idea in the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. They start off with a story about a company that's just one person, and then they get super, super busy, and then they go, oh my goodness, I need someone to do the books. Oh good, here, you do the books. And then they abdicate all responsibility to that person, and then they go off and do what they're going to do. So that's kind of what we did. I mean, Brooks walked in the door, and I probably threw a pile of permits and plans at him and said, have fun, go build these 7 houses, and I'm going to go look for some more lots.
These 7 houses were actually 9 houses, and they were all sold.
Actually 9. It was 9.
Yeah, so
it was 9 houses.
Here's 9 customers, and and here's a spec sheet that's really not so detailed. So
no,
exciting. Yeah.
So, but I think we kind of learned from that. So we started developing some systems, and let's put together a spec sheet for the houses so we understand what we're building, and they can actually move from one person to another, and that knowledge can be transferred. And so we started to put some of those systems in place.
Yeah. And so I guess as you're going down this path, you kind of just got thrown into it. And it sounds like that was kind of the general approach initially. And it's just kind of trial by fire. Since your dad was busy kind of doing a new initiative, it was kind of like, hey, you guys got to take this and run with it. I'm kind of curious, I guess, was it all specs at the time, or any remodeling, or were you building communities, or what was kind of the state of the business and what you guys were focused on for product?
Brooks, do you want to handle that one?
Sure. Yeah, we were doing all, in the term specs refers to speculative home building, and so it's shortened to spec home building. And so we were doing all speculative home building. We would acquire the lots, get the permits, pick the plans, and deliver the finished product. And when that house was done, it would get on the market. We might sell them before they were done and make a few modifications, but it was all single family detached construction in the suburban market around the Seattle metro area. And it was just, Wes mentioned getting permits, and so we would be getting permits for 50 houses a year, and permits seemed like such a hard thing to get. It might take a month to get a permit or something. When Todd and I exited the business, it was taking 1.5 years to get a building permit. And
wow.
So we're not going to get into the housing shortage questions, which would be more political, but it was an entirely different business when we exited than when Wes and I came into it, for sure.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that was really a large driver of cost in the Seattle area, for sure, was regulation. I think just in the time that I was getting permits, it went to 7 months or 8 months in the city of Seattle. One of the things that complicated our process, maybe more than for some other smaller builders, because we're definitely a small builder. We built anywhere from, our goal was to build 36 houses a year. We wanted to do 3 starts a month. And I think at one point we were over 50 in a year. And then other years we might be down more in the 24 to 30 range, depending on the market. But one thing that did complicate our process is that we worked in a lot of different jurisdictions. So we were dealing with, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 jurisdictions. So they all had their own regulations, their own permitting processes and so on. So that added a special spice to the whole thing.
Well, and for context for folks is that in some states, they don't require building permits.
Yeah.
Some jurisdictions. So I have builder friends across the country, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, well I went down and got a permit today," and I'm, my jaw drops, and I'm like, "Well, that's a 18-month process in some of our jurisdictions." And so
yeah. Did you apply for that permit 18 months ago so you could pick it up today, or did you just walk down there?
Some places you don't even need a permit. So so it's just it's interesting. It's different across the country.
Yeah. So as you guys were kind of, you're doing a lot of the spec building. And so at this point, you two are in the business. Todd, your younger brother, is in the business. What were some of the, I guess, more challenging components of working with your siblings? And then maybe on the flip side too, like what are some of the most rewarding parts? Because I know, like, I'm talking to a lot of construction companies every week these days, and so many of them are family business, whether it's parents bringing in like a child into the business, or there are siblings, oftentimes brothers, who co-own the business, different dynamics like that. So maybe talk about some of those early challenges, because I know those shifted and you kind of worked through some things over time and you figured things out, but kind of those first several years of working together, what did you guys kind of uncover there?
Boy, Brooks, you want to lead off with anything, or?
Having obviously the ability to look back at it, it's a good question, Spencer, that having the maturity at certain points in your life, sometimes you wish, I wish I had been more mature or had more education around certain things, around personality profiles, or around just general business. So I came right into the business right out of school with a business degree. But my business experience was very little, and I had never worked for anybody else. So probably out of that experience, I would recommend, it doesn't hurt to have, if you think you're laying a path down for having your kids come into the business, having them go work somewhere else for someone who's not a sibling or a parent is probably a very good thing. So now I was the second one into the business, so Wes might have a different perspective, or Todd might have a different perspective, or our sister Heidi might have a different perspective.
Yeah, and that's true. And we might mention that at different times, our sister Heidi definitely was involved in the business and worked in the business. And even our sister Lori at times worked in it. And this, we're talking about when we're really ramped up and building and doing different projects. So, but I guess I would agree with that. Just, it's always good to have an outside look at how other businesses operate and how reporting structures might work. I think we were blessed in that the three of us got along really, really well. So we didn't have any knockdown, drag out fights. There wasn't a lot of personality conflicts. But I think the idea of thinking about personality types is a good one that Brooks brings up. You can do disc profiles and things like that. But just knowing whether someone is a hard charger or someone is more of a people pleaser, is someone really good at detail, or are they not really good at detail? So it takes you a while, if you don't know any of those things, to figure out, because the reason you're in the business is because you're family, right? That's how you got into the business. It wasn't because, I met this great guy, Brooks or Todd or Wes, and they're perfect fit for the business. They have all this background. We did have background. We understood the business. We had all built houses before we actually started doing it in earnest. But to understand that you are basically trying to take people that are there because they're family members and put them into the right boxes. So trying to figure out first, what are the boxes, and then what's the right box for that person to be in, that takes a little while. I mean, Brooks, would you say, based on you and Todd, in terms of running a job or being a construction supervisor, so if you don't mind sharing, what's your personality profile?
Oh, I'm in the disc profile, so I'm
Yeah.
a high D. So
You're a high D, so very dominant,
dominant.
hard charger. Let's make decisions. Let's move on.
Yeah.
You know, at that time, I was very much a high I, which would be more of a people person, you know, people pleaser sort of thing. You know, wants everyone to get along, kumbaya. And then Todd is very detail oriented. He'd be a high C, very list oriented. So Brooks started off in construction, I mean, and actually supervising because that's where I needed him. But, you know, that wasn't his best spot. You know, he was really good at seeing vision and looking out in the future and where do we want to be and what's going on with trends and let's make some decisions. And where Todd was a very, very good construction supervisor. And that's where we ultimately ended up, right?
Yeah.
But took trial and error. It took longer than it probably needed to.
Yeah.
Just because we weren't aware.
Where the market is and where the business is and where the economy is, and and the whole time you're trying to, you're trying to build the plane while you're flying it, and you're sitting here going, okay, well the market's up, it's down, and you're trying to keep cash flow going, and so it's interesting.
That's an interesting point, Brooks, because if you think about the other factor, which is what's going on with the economy, what's going on with the marketplace, while you're trying to figure out a business at the same time, so your background is always changing.
Right.
So I think most business owners who are new to the business or, you know, fresh out of school or fresh into business, I think Brooks talks to these guys all the time, guys and ladies who have businesses in the remodeling space who maybe have never seen a downturn, you know, so they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And if you think you are super smart because everything just happens magically and it works great and everything sells, you're in for a rude awakening at some point.
Yeah, no, I think that's we've been in, a 10-year cycle. So it's been pretty phenomenal. And, the older you are, the more ups and downs you've seen, which then can make you less willing to take advantage of ups, which it can be a shortcoming. But sometimes when you've just started and you've only seen one part of the cycle, then it'll make it more challenging as the economy moves up and down. And so as we've seen, it's very similar to in the 60s. We had almost a 10-year cycle until 70, where everything was up after World War II. And then when it was very volatile from 70 until 80, 84, 85. And then it was very volatile, up and down every 2 or 3 years. And then again in the mid 90s and then it was a big push up. So it does make it challenging when you're trying to grow your business, expand your business, and you're basing it on, well, I did $1 million worth of revenue this year, I'm going to 1.5 next year, and then I'm going to, 3 times that, and it's grow. While that happens, the economy goes up and down, and I'm doing $1 million, then I'm doing $1.5 million, now I'm doing $1.2 million, then I'm doing up, down. So and you're doing that while you're operating a business that has family members in it.
Right. And I think there's nothing wrong with setting goals. I think that's important, to set your goals and work towards those. But I think with time you realize, okay, I'm setting these goals. For instance, I guess an example would be, for a while, Brooks and Todd and I, we would say, okay, we have found the silver bullet. We're going to build exactly 36 houses a year, and we're going to build exactly these 3 or 4 floor plans, because these are the perfect floor plans, and we're going to do that forever until we retire. So this is the naivete of guys in their 20s who don't know anything. So, and we were in it was an okay market, and we were able to do that. But then one day, I guess someone shut off the spigot, and we're not doing 36 houses a year or 50 houses a year, and market changes and you're doing 24 houses or 20, and then you have to adjust to that. So I think if I had to give any advice, I guess it would be, if I was just going back into the construction business, starting out in my 20s again, full-time doing that, I would definitely latch onto an older mentor around that. And sometimes that could be a non-family member, I would say, because, certainly we had our dad there, who, if we were interested in listening, we might have gotten some good advice from, but he was pretty involved with the new projects that he was doing. And he kind of left us to our own devices, for the most part. And so, and you know how it is, not so interested in listening to your dad all that much, but you can get a lot of good advice. Or, we could have gone and asked our grandfather. He was certainly around and retired and could have added some good insight if we thought to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-way street. If we thought to ask, and they thought to offer. So
well,
I think
that's true.
part of it, to your point, Wes, which is, getting advice from people who've been through the mill is super valuable, and that's where industry associations are great, where people are very willing to give back and say, hey, I just got put through the grinder on this, and it was a key part of my growth cycle. Glad to share that with you. And people freely give that information if you just ask. And now with the advent of being able to communicate through podcasts and a lot of these other avenues, it's so much quicker to get information, to find information specifically.
Yeah, and I want to jump back to an earlier point. We were talking about kind of the personality types with you three brothers, and then you said you brought up DISC, and you kind of started going through that. I'm curious, just for people listening that maybe haven't done that test, or they are working with family right now. It sounds like to some degree you kind of just had a working mix. You guys all worked well together, and you didn't have a lot of fights or disagreements. You all were different on the DISC profile, so that maybe was a part of it. But I was curious too, do you feel like it was more due to that? Like you just had the benefit of different personalities that ended up working together, or was it like a common goal and you guys that was just the most important, you were all working towards the same thing? Or and then kind of recommendations for people, like, is it worth doing the DISC and trying to do that early on versus just kind of winging it at the beginning? Looking back, you guys have talked about how after you look back, you go, oh yeah, maybe I would have changed a few things.
Oh yeah, I would have changed a lot of things. Yeah, that's 2020 hindsight.
Yeah, well, it is 2020, so
it is 2020, so we got that nailed.
That should be the name of the podcast,
That's right.
Hindsight.
Hindsight.
Yeah, hindsight.
If only
it's not too late to rename it. We're only on episode 1, so.
My thought would be treating your business like a business is the key thing. And having had no exposure to a business, having started out, that's probably one of my bigger takeaways is that you can sell, build, do anything, but it's still a business. And then what are those key factors? And I think going back to building job descriptions, building profiles for what's the best personality profile for this description, and using that as a guide to help you try to hire someone very close to that personality profile for that description is very helpful. So you don't end up with the absolutely wrong person because sometimes you're just trying to plug a hole, which is, I need somebody in this spot because I'm dying. But with a little extra effort, you can actually hire that right person.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think another part of it would be setting goals for the business. First, think of it as a business. It is a business, so it's a means to an end in some ways. Sometimes the process itself can be the end for some people because they enjoy the process. But what ultimately do you want that business to become? What is it trying to fulfill as a business? And because you might have radically different opinions about that. So in the case of Brooks and Todd and myself, we never actually sat down and talked about, what's the ultimate goal of the business. I think we all said, we want to make enough money to retire someday, and those types of things. But we didn't really sit down and talk about any of those things. We just talked about, we want to build this many houses next year. That was the sum total. So I think, what's the goal of the business? How do we want to be structured? What are the job descriptions? what do I need? You know, what does that org chart look like? What are the types of people that would go in the org chart, as Brooks was talking about, and what are the best disc profiles for the people in that? But I think the people within the business, especially it's a family business, is you really need to, everyone has a different dynamic growing up. So either they got along as kids or they didn't get along, you know, maybe they fought like cats and dogs or they didn't. And you have to be able to separate yourself from those types of things. You know, for me, I looked at the family business as a great way to spend time with my brothers. So, you know, that is probably, maybe my viewpoint was a little bit different than Brooks and Todd's, but like, oh, this is fun because I'm working with my brothers. And I think they probably felt the same way, but we didn't take it a step further and go, okay, well, is that the total goal? Do we have any other goals that we want to try to accomplish?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think,
go ahead,
yeah,
Brooks.
yeah, I don't think, Spencer, you know, there was, you know, a lot of introspection, you know, in the first 10 years. It's like, you know what, we're trying to make a living, we're trying to grow this business, and you know, you've got growing families and you've got financial needs. So there's, you know, there's a lot of things in the mix, and probably introspection and deep thinking at that moment were not, there wasn't a lot of that happening. So yeah, that's one of those things I always suggest is, hey, you know, sit down and think about it, because that's something that I could have definitely done a better job of, is, you know, thought more deeply about the business.
Yeah, and I would bet there's a lot of remodelers and builders out there. You get in fairly young and you immediately, you know, you're married, you have kids, you've got other responsibilities that are new to you. And so all of those things kind of crashing down at the same time can make it very difficult to be very introspective or take a step outside of what's going on for even a half a beat, you know, for a weekend or something, and think about that. But it'd be super valuable to do it.
Yeah, you're busy making payroll, you've got kids, you're running kids to baseball and basketball, and you're, you know, maybe you're coaching and you're running your business, and getting that time away, you know, even if it's a few weekends a year, to try to get your head together and think about the business. And if you're involved with it with your family or your spouse, or you're just doing it by yourself, it's that time to think about it is important.
Yeah, no, that's one thing that I've picked up from you guys too, is just, you know, if you do take a little bit of time to just think about where you're going or what you want it to be, you know, 10 years just goes like that, you know. And so if you're just kind of caught up in the whirlwind, as they say, of the business, and you're just going, and then you look up and you're going, okay, you know, it's been a decade, or it's been, you know, this amount of time. And so I think that's good advice, you know, for any stage of the business that you're at, but especially, you know, when you're early on and trying to set yourself up for the future, because all of a sudden it becomes the future. Let's jump back quickly to a little bit of the history and just continuing forward to current. So I think when we left off, like, the three brothers are in the business, you guys are building homes, you've got this, you know, 36 homes a year is the perfect, you know, formula. What happened after that? And kind of, did you guys just continue working together forever, or, you know, how did that go?
Oh, is that going to be me, Brooks?
Yeah, dramatic pause for effect. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, nailed it. Yeah, that was. I'm looking at my script, and
awesome.
You hit it. Yeah.
Oh, well, no, obviously it didn't continue on forever, in that, because nothing continues forever. So probably in about in the mid 90s, probably, we hit a downturn. I don't know, Brooks, when was that downturn? 94 or something?
It was 94 to 96, and we've been going, you know, we've been charging pretty hard for 10 years. We've been through one mini slowdown, and then it got a little bit better, and then we took a big downturn in 94, 95 that lasted about 5 years.
Yeah. So I think at that point, in 96, I received an offer from my father-in-law out in Colorado to come buy his business, which was totally different. And I think probably early midlife crisis or something, of going, okay, you know, the kids are small, and new opportunity, something different for me to challenge myself with. And I think I was also pretty worn down with the poor market, and we were stretched, and we can talk about leverage some other day. I want to talk about leverage. That's a subject for an entire podcast, right?
Yeah.
So I took him up on that opportunity and moved the family to Colorado to buy that business, which ultimately morphed into Builder Funnel, which is Spencer's business at this point. So that's how I exited the business. But then Brooks, you can probably talk about what.
Yeah, so that, Wes's exit obviously created an opportunity for me to run the single family division, and we were also doing development to build another senior community. So at that point, I got the opportunity to finish the development on that, build that community while we were building single family, and that my moving in that space of doing both those things gave room for Todd to take on more responsibility in the single family side, and also create an opportunity for our sister, who came into the business and ran all the marketing for one of the senior communities, and then set up all the operations for the new senior community that we built from 97 to 2001. And that continued on till 2002, 2003. And then Todd and I, at that point, were ready to move out on our own in the construction business. So we bought the construction company from our parents, and our sister continued on. We, at that point, had set up a property management company to manage the properties that we built over the last 20 years. And she ran that for a couple more years. And then she eventually exited the business and to start her own business. And then at that point, we were all combined with some common ownerships of properties, but don't actually work in the same businesses anymore. Todd and I stayed partners, and still are partners now in the construction industry, in a construction business. And that's how it's evolved to today, to now.
Gotcha. So basically at that time, that was kind of the split off, where there was a property management company that was managing some apartment buildings and the retirement communities, and then you guys took the construction business and ran with that. Right. Is that kind of okay?
Yeah, that's it. So our sister stayed on with the property management business that our father owns, and then she, after a few years, left to pursue her own business. And so we all live in the same town. We live in the same small town outside Seattle. So the Powell name, is pretty well known, since it's been around for 110 years. So it's just, we're involved in construction and apartment management, senior management, just in our small market.
Yeah. And so just to round us out to current, so Wes, you bought the direct mail business, and then kind of take us from there, and we'll get caught up to
Sure.
2020.
Yeah. So in '96, came out to Colorado, bought this direct mail processing business, which is totally different than building. And once again, though, it was a family business. So I guess I'm an expert or non-expert in family businesses. That's all I've ever had experience with, honestly. So bought that business and then operated that until the downturn in direct mail, which really happened during the Great Recession, as we call it. And really media changed quite a bit. So at that point, Spence, and you could probably tell this part of the story yourself, but I mean, essentially you came out of college, you were starting your own social media company. And at that point we said, hey, let's partner up on this. Let's give this new company some support so it can continue to grow and figure out what it is, because really internet marketing was pretty new at that period of time, explosive growth around that industry. And so you really nurtured that business along, and then we finally sold off the direct mail portion of the business. And now you've changed and rebranded the inbound marketing services that we offered into Builder Funnel Radio, really because we discovered that we are totally focusing on builders and remodelers and helping them with their marketing, because that was the space that we're very, very familiar with, both from a family business dynamic and from a marketing standpoint. So that kind of brings us up to current state, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And it was interesting when you were talking about when you got out of school, you kind of said, hey, I've been, scrapping lots and doing all this stuff. I don't want to be involved in that business. So
Yeah.
you went another route, but then that route pulled you back in, through a kind of a different project, right? It was doing the market study for the retirement community. And as you were saying that, I'm going, that's exactly what happened to me. Cause I'm like, I stuffed a lot of envelopes growing up and I don't really care about direct mail. I don't think I want to be involved with this business. And then got into social media. And then it was like, hey, I've got to transform this business with a new, kind of, we called it a disruptive business within the legacy business. And that's where that took off. So interesting to see that parallel. We might be related or something, but, and then Brooks, obviously you didn't scrap enough lots. So you're like, yep, give me more of that. Like I'm in for it.
I think to the point though, I mean, and I'd love to, we should probably talk about transformation in businesses at some point, because Brooks and Todd certainly transformed their business through the Great Recession from a spec business and to something different, but still within the construction space. So, which I thought was fascinating to watch them do that transformation and do it so well. So I think that's an interesting topic in and of itself.
Yeah, and maybe Brooks, you can continue and get your side of the story up to current, and maybe touch on that transformation. We'll definitely dig into that in some later episodes.
Sure. So after Todd and I bought the construction business in 2002, we were rolling along. Economy was super hot, and we could do no wrong. I would say. And so I can still distinctly remember it was September 2008. I was out looking at a couple of finished spec houses, and I got a call on my phone that said, the stock market is just unwound over subprime. And I had no idea what subprime was. And little did I know that my business would be so heavily affected by what Wall Street was doing, and something that I had even no idea what was going on. And so our business quickly went from building, 30, 40 houses a year to we went from 30, 40 houses a year in 2008 to 3 houses in 2011.
Wow.
So, business just, was gone. And every builder in the speculative building space, that's what happened. So there was tens of thousands of us that went through that. So we had to reinvent our business. And so that's where we added custom homes. We added remodeling, so we blasted into the remodeling space as quick as we could, and learned how to become remodelers. And that's where you took the idea of businesses and how do you set up a business? And like, well, we know how to build. So how are we going to learn how to be great remodelers? And so that was our next task for the next 10 years till last year. And so that's where we ended up. We ended up as speculative home builders, custom home builders, and remodelers.
Yeah.
And that's how we ended the business.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, both of those journeys that you guys were on, when the tough times hit, you acted fast, and I can't speak as much to how fast you moved into remodeling, Brooks, but I know, Wes, I remember distinctly you said, I just went to this conference. They said direct mail is going off a cliff. Like, we got to get into some new things. And you, like, within 20 days or 30 days had already rebranded the company. We're pushing into those new things. And like, didn't really know what you're doing, but I think, fast action.
Obviously.
Yeah. Well, but I think, you watched a lot of guys go out of business, in that industry, and whereas you did not. And so, and I'm sure the same for you, Brooks, and so to me, my takeaway was, when those things happen, like, quickly kind of pop your head up, look around and say, okay, where can I just start taking new action, because the same action isn't working. But I don't know, I'd be interested to hear if you guys like went through that thought process. That was kind of my view looking back at it, but what was the mindset as you guys got hit with that Great Recession?
I think for in the construction business, we tried, different things the whole time. So we went from, building 30 houses a year to 3 over the course of 3 years. And every month you're trying to figure, okay, what am I doing? Because now it's like, oh, the Great Recession of 2008. Well, it went on and on and on, month after month of just getting worse and worse and worse. So it's this triage. You're like, okay, I've got it fixed. And then 3 months later, oh, I don't have it fixed. And the whole time you're going along, you're like, well, I'm trying to keep my business going. I'm still buying lots. You're like, okay, well, this is the right kind of product. And then as the market continues to fall, you're like, oh, it's not the right kind of product. And then you still have to unload it. And there's no consumers because there's no financing. So it's one of those situations where people think, oh, well, there'll always be, plentiful mortgages. I mean, there was no mortgages for 24 months. And so it kind of goes back to the 30s when someone said, well, why are you worried about banks failing? You're like, well, banks haven't failed for 50 years. And, but someone who went through that in the 30s is like, well, they do fail. And so it's a similar thing. That's where that perspective is helpful as you're trying to move through your business journey, is hearing about other things that can happen. So we were reacted, and we're constantly trying to come up with a plan. And it just, it wasn't working. I mean, it wouldn't work. We tried this, it wouldn't work. We tried this, it wouldn't work. And luckily we had plenty of reserves built up that we had some room, but it was a scramble all the way until it really kind of bottomed out in 11 and then started to come back up. So really the economy recovering allowed us to recover. It wasn't anything that we were still in business. So it allowed us to take advantage of that. But, the whole economy and the whole country had to recover, and then we came along with it.
I think that with what I heard you say though, Brooks, and I think it's an important point and it ties into what Spencer just said, which is, taking action. So even though it was difficult, I think just being iterative in what you're trying. So you're experimenting, you're trying things don't work, you're going to try something else, and you're trying to experiment as fast as you can to get to a new model. And I think that's a good mind exercise to play, with your business, which is, okay, well, if this happened, how would I iterate? What would I change to? And, for us in our business, really, whereas building came back, the direct mail industry, the way we had known it, certainly went through structural destruction and transformation. And so most smaller shops never came back. Printers didn't come back in the same way. And so the whole industry changed. And so you had to iterate pretty quickly to figure out what your new thing is going to be. How can you provide a valuable service that people want to buy? And so that's what we tried to do. But that's what you were doing as well, I think. And it was just probably, so if you're in a business that has hard, tangible assets that you have to deal with. So if you're in the building business, you got lots and you've got finished product. And so as Brooks was saying, hey, man, if that finished product isn't right, I still have to sell it, so I can go on and experiment again with something else. So that makes it harder. So I think that's something that business owners have to look at, which is how much capital do I have invested in assets that are illiquid, and how quickly can I experiment to get to a new business model. So, in our case, we had lots of equipment sitting around in a shop. We had big inserting machines and folders and all those types of things. Whereas today, a lot of internet businesses don't have much in terms of hard assets that they have to worry about. So they can probably iterate a little bit faster. So their hard assets are really around personnel and thought leadership and their employees and what those employees can bring to the table. And so I don't know if it's easier because things are moving even faster. It's not. I doubt it's any easier. But
not any easier.
Certainly something to think about. If your remodeling business changed dramatically, what would you do? How are you situated? Do you have a strong balance sheet?
Yeah, I think those are good takeaways. And kind of now that we're here in 2020, we're into a deep, run. what would be maybe some final takeaways from you guys before we wrap for today? As you know, things are strong, people are feeling really good. I know you mentioned, Brooks, that you guys had some reserves and you had put some things in place, so you were able to basically work your way through some difficulties. What would be the top, one, two, three things for people to put in place now and over the next, 12 months, 24 months, however long we have left, or before something will change?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was going through some files the other day as I was cleaning out some things, and um, the biggest thing one of the things I said, we had in reserves when we went into the recession, we had 24 months of operating reserves. And we had just worked really diligently because we had asked lots of questions of older people. We'd polled our CPA, our other financial people, hey, how much should we have in reserves? And, the standard number is 3 to 6 months of operating reserves so you can run your company. And we were like, we're in a highly speculative business. So we had built up, 2 years of reserves. And we went through, even though as we downsized and things like that, we went through all of that and more. So my biggest takeaway is, build a balance sheet, build your cash reserves, give yourself time, because that's the key thing. So if you've got cash, you can survive anything. And that's the hardest thing to do when you're in building business, you're in the remodeling business. Cash is always in short supply. So manage your balance sheet, manage your accounts receivable, collect, do not do free work, get paid for everything you do, have your right markup, your right margin. And if you do those things, you'll survive anything, I think.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Brooks. I think as you were saying that, I was thinking about how long it took us to transform from direct mail to inbound marketing, work through that transition. And it was easily 36, 48 months, probably, from start to finish.
Yeah.
And even if you do make adjustments, in your business as you go along and do that, you do have to have a strong balance sheet. Yeah, that's certainly one thing that our father has always preached, is have a super strong balance sheet. He has a friend who's a banker who said, have a fortress balance sheet, right?
Yep.
Because sometimes you have to crawl inside that fortress and protect yourself. And if you've been through enough cycles, that cycles end, the low point ends. And so you have to be there to take advantage of the upswing. If you're not there because you didn't make it, you can't do anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, build the fortress. And I know that was something that, Wes, you and my mom, Karen, you guys instilled, budgeting, into and saving, from a young age. And so I think you guys made us save half of everything we earned, or half of our allowance. So we had like a whole $2 left over to go spend ourselves, but that was good, because then, that set us up well, when we got into college and wanted to start, doing some things, and, you start spending money and it starts going out. Then you've built that mentality. And so I think for a lot of people listening too, as I've entered the business world, I've really looked at that on, try to look at it on both fronts, like build the fortress personally and within the business. And then you've kind of got both of those things working for you. And I think to your guys' benefit, because you built that, you probably watched a lot of people that weren't able to weather that storm because they didn't have enough in reserves and had to either go out and start again fresh, or that was just kind of the finish line. So I think it's very timely advice for everyone listening now. Like, nobody has the crystal ball, but we're all kind of sitting here wondering, I think, like what the timeline looks like, just because we're so deep into this run. So we're going to wrap here, and next episode, I know we're going to dig into a little more specifics around the like family dynamics and relationships and working with siblings or parents and that sort of thing. But yeah, I appreciate you guys joining me today. Hopefully everyone listening had some fun with the history, and we'll try to pull out some fun stories for everyone. But you guys got anything before we wrap?
No, appreciate the time.
Yeah, I really do. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week for episode 2. And thanks again for tuning in to Builder Funnel Radio.